From the Smart Talk Radio Network and brought to you by Lester Insure One. Lester Insure One. Welcome to The Hard Question. The Hard Question. And here's your host, Blanquita Cullum.
We had a pretty rough weekend here in Chicago. Everyone's talking about it around the country with over 100 people shot, including kids, and 14 killed. A pretty rough situation, especially when there are cries to defund the police. But the new superintendent, David Brown, is saying, wait a minute, offenders don't need to be getting out of prison. They need to stay in prison longer. This home detention is not good enough. Well, a friend of the program, retired Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari, who is running for the 9th Congressional District here in our state of Illinois, he spent a lot of time in combat in the Middle East, and as a matter of fact, in a special operations force. And Sargis, welcome to the show. Before I even get started, because you and I have a lot to talk about, I want to make sure that everybody knows your page so that they can go to your site. I know that you're ready to put yard signs out and everything, so let's give that right at the beginning.
It's good to be here, Blanquita, as usual. Of course, I'm running the Republican nominee in the 9th Congressional District, so I'm running for the U.S. Congress here. That's going to include all parts of Chicago, Des Plaines, Evanston, Glenview, Lincolnwood, Morton Grove, Mount Prospect, Niles, Park Ridge, Prospect Heights, Skokie, Wilmette, Winnetka, Arlington Heights. And it's huge, 700,000 plus people. So it's anchored around the Chicago North Side along Lake Michigan and covers the Chicago northern suburbs. But they could go to votesangari.com. And if they go to votesangari.com, donations are great. We're getting the yard signs out now. That's one of the major ways of getting the discussion started as to who we want in Congress on 3 November 20.
Sargis, I want to go to something that you sent me because you talked about this is not an accident. This is all happening. It's deliberate, and we're being played. And you sent me a diagram talking about, because you've been engaged in action over in the Middle East, you talked about large-scale guerrilla actions and minor-scale guerrilla actions. And I would suspect, since this is across the United States, that you can tell me if I'm wrong, that this would be considered a large-scale guerrilla action. But talk about how that plan, I mean, this is something that they're not reinventing the wheel. There's a whole strategy of how things happen. And it talks about what happens underground, where you have increased political violence, terrorist sabotage, intense sapping of morale of government, administration, police, and military, increased underground activities to demonstrate the strength of the revolutionary organization, sabotage and terror to demonstrate the weakness of government. And the next one that you talked about were overt and covert pressures against government, strikes, riots, and disorder. Talk about this whole, because there's much more there.
Well, look, you cannot run a insurgency operation unless you know the human character, right? So it's a human character that has been studied over thousands of years, and many authors have written about it. What an insurgent does, he literally comes in, ties in specifically to the government structures and tries to use it for his advantage. In this case, you have individuals who are disgruntled with what is happening. They have risen up. They don't like the fact that the legislator is not doing anything. And everything that you see will continue until 3 November when the voters decide who they want to have in office. And it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. Foreign governments use it. When we're looking at the photos coming out of Seattle, a lot of those facial recognition on the civilian side was hitting a 40% hit rate for individuals that were on TRICOM ties or were getting support from Chinese Communist Party. So this will continue to happen, and as we start degrading our police, of course, you're going to have other networks like the drug cartel expanding the footprint to ensure that money comes in. You have to create an atmosphere of a party. Everybody gets what they want.
Sargis, I look at the timing of all of this because clearly there's been a lot of efforts. People, in many cases, don't like President Trump. They don't like his personality, the people that are in opposition to him. And they've tried to take him down, whether it was through impeachment and other methods. Some people say there's a deep state, there's a deep church. There's a lot of organizations that have banded together because the enemy of my enemy is my friend to try to stop this. On top of this, you had the pandemic. The concern that many of us have, because legitimately people have a right to disagree and not to support the person that's in office. I mean, I've voted against people in office I didn't like. But unfortunately, this has gone to a much deeper level where they want to overthrow the government. So, what do you make of this? So you're running for office. This has to be a pretty difficult time to be a candidate.
It is, but this is a place where guys like me who actually fought in insurgencies, participated in somewhat running microcosm of an insurgency when we were running those Syrian Army multi-operations, would be the old term asymmetrical warfare in both Iraq and Syria, had to conduct. So I've seen it from both ends. So this is a time where you get a guy like me who says, you know what, we got to get in because I cannot allow this to rule what's going to happen in our country. Either we're going to have law and order, or we're going to have what you have in Seattle. And you see the outcome of it itself. You create an area called CHOPS. All these different groups that are in there, to include initially Antifa going in there was strong. Now they're all fighting each other. And at the end of the day, they're going to fizzle out. They're going to eat each other internally. Or the reality is going to be that, you know what, we have to replace the government leadership to bring others who have a little bit of a stronger will. They're willing to dissect these type of insurgency operations, go after them one at a time.
All right, so let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Sargis. I mean, clearly that sounds, like a smart tactic, but the question is, in the meantime, you have a lot of Republicans who are very weak that won't stand up to the threat. You have a lot of Democrats that are happy that's happening because it could look like they could gain more power on both houses of the Congress and maybe ultimately the White House. But the fact of the matter is, you've got buildings that are being burned. You've got segments of the city that are in fear of violence. You've got statues being toppled. You've got a lot of people that are basically bending down and saluting to a group that they're not even sure who's paying for them, under the guise of it's really to have a system of fairness and justice, when most people kind of feel like, is it that fair when you're going to burn down things and throw out the rule of law? How do you deal with it?
Well, unfortunately, you have to deal with it through what you are. Like I said, everything can be resolved on 3 November. Look at Chicago in itself. I mean, you saw that David Brown, the Chicago police superintendent, pretty much bluntly stated in his comments that, we cannot just have this rotating door of people that are captured by the police turned over to the Cook County prosecutor, and then they're let out. So somebody needs to be able to go ask Kim Foxx, why are you allowing this to happen constantly? But Kim Foxx not going to do anything about it because she's running for election, and she just wants to be able to be voted in on 3 November. She could care less about what is happening currently on the ground. Politicians are not going to take a step forward because they're all kind of fearful how it's going to affect them come the elections in a few months. So not only are you destroying the morale of the police, they've been dying because of COVID. Majority of the police that we have lost in Chicago have died because of the COVID-related health issues. And then now you fast forward to where you're trying to take their immunities away, and then you're telling them, oh, by the way, go deal with this situation. So their morale is destroyed. Everything that, they have no trust that you're going to back them up. Even on the other side, if you want to talk about the hawks who are saying we got to go in here and clean up this area, we got to go into Seattle, those would be the first people I will tell you that will sell out those police officers and those members of law enforcement if it turns out to be bloody when they have to go in and clean up an area.
Well, you saw what happened in CHOP. You saw the guy that got the guy that the leader of CHOP was coming in screaming that the police, that the ambulance wasn't coming in for the guy who had been killed or had later died, but they weren't going to go in without the authority of having the police with them, and the police couldn't go in. So,
and you can't blame him. You can't blame the lieutenant to make that call because, if he goes in, if he doesn't know what's going to happen to him, they're going to hold the lieutenant responsible. He doesn't go in, and he feels bad because he's a law enforcement, and he's supposed to make the right calls to save these people, especially before they die. These are Americans, folks, whether we like it or not. And Chop, they're Americans, and they're eating each other internally because there's no organizational structure. But it's a job of the mayor and the governor of that city to fix this. They have to make sure that they say that we're standing behind law enforcement, come out in a statement ahead of time, and go in and slowly the bad elements get removed. The one who wants to protest, God bless you, all day long. Protest as much as you want. But the
Well, the
bad
interesting
elements, the ones
thing
that
is
break
that
the law,
some,
have
I
to be
think,
targeted.
are citizens, but then there's a concern about the contingents that could be supported through, as you talked about it, whether Antifa, ISIS, some are saying that are being funded through, coming in through Venezuela, because my contacts that are media folks from Venezuela are saying Venezuela is in there. The Maduro people are putting them in there. Some people are saying that there's an influence from communist China. And it's hard to know exactly what the mix is and where the funding is coming from. A lot of people would like to say that it is George Soros, but gosh, Sargis, I'd like to have someone doing an investigation on that. Go to votesangari.com. That's VOTESANGARI.com. Sargis, we'll keep in touch with you. Keep us posted as well. This is The Hard Question on the Smart Talk Radio Network. I'm Blanquita Cohen.